Okay, let's get started. Welcome to Protecting Your SaaS. I'm Matt Brooks. I'm an architect with Citrix Technical Marketing. I've been with Citrix about 8 years, and I've been in a lot of different roles. So I've worked on the customer side and the product side, and had some good exposure to our networking technology, which we're going to talk a lot about today. And I'm honored to be joined by my colleague Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott Fanning. I've been running product management for security at Citrix. Been at Citrix for a whopping 14 months, I think, at this point. And really excited to work with you, Matt. I think this is going to be a great topic.
Great. So previously in the Geek's Guide to the Workspace, and I should recap, if you're not familiar with this, we're doing a 10-part session series. So this is the third of 10. The session before this, we talked about identity and basically the importance of it, significance of it, and a lot of the complexities and challenges with maintaining passwords, making them complex, having multiple passwords for different sites. And so that's really the first thing we talked about, right? Which it's probably one of the most important. It's your key to open the door. If the bad actors get in your house through the front door, those other protections aren't really going to help you. And so now we're going to take the identity and build on that. And we're going to talk about single sign-on a lot. So we're going to talk about single sign-on for SaaS apps, web apps, and mobile apps. And we're really going to talk about diminishing the importance and need for using those passwords that users forget or always have trouble making complex. Before we get into those, we're going to talk a bit about Citrix Access Control and Gateway Service. These are really foundational technologies to enable providing single sign-on as well as additional protections for SaaS web and mobile apps. So Scott, why don't you kick us off after a quick NDA?
Yeah.
We are going to talk about a couple of roadmap items, so just everyone needs to be clear that no guarantees if or when they will be delivered.
Yeah, I'm a product manager. I'm always predisposed to disappointment on delivery dates, so it's okay with NDAs, okay? All right, so let's talk about the typical journey or digital transformation a typical cloud vendor kind of does today, right? So if you look here, you have your enterprise apps on your data center, and you usually have a proxy, a DMZ to kind of obfuscate your access to your SaaS or your web applications on your on-prem data center and remote access to typical VPN kind of things. But application delivery is becoming more diverse and actually in some cases more complex. You have SaaS and public cloud that provide different kind of hosting opportunities, different kind of cost structures, different kind of geography footprint, different type of regulatory environments or regulated clouds like in the healthcare industry and such. So that's one thing you have to do. And what they do to try to consolidate that, make it easier, is they do single sign-on. So one password, get access to all these apps, because obviously if you had to sign into every one of them, the user experience is poor. Your passwords get weaker because you're probably going to be replicating these passwords against multiple properties. And then if you look at unsanctioned SaaS and internet apps, typically they'll put a web filter in place and say, hey, these are the applications that you can go to, these are the applications you can't go to. It tends to be a fairly binary decision about what to do, and it also gives some insight to that kind of shadow IT, where the apps are, how you're trying to access these things. Now, what we are trying to offer here is a consolidation of all three of those things. Web filtering, a proxy, single sign-on, and cloud app control. And as we go through the different slides in architecture, what we'll explain to you is the benefits and all the different capabilities around this, and we'll also have some video demos as well, Matt, so this is going to be pretty good.
And so getting past the point solution, Scott, it not only improves user experience, but it improves your security posture, I think, right? There's less chance for admin mistakes by consolidating all that technology in one spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, if you allow the enterprise themselves to do that kind of consolidation on their own, you're burdened with actually doing all that infrastructure, hooking all these different parts together. And some of these parts have some overlap. So you start to question, which has the priority events versus the other capability. An average enterprise has anywhere from 60 to 90 security controls in it. And that puts a lot of burden on the enterprise. And really the outcome is about protection. And that's what we're trying to deliver here.
So complexity definitely isn't the friend of security in terms of administering it.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay.
So if you look at the end user experience with the Workspace app, so you saw what happened with the intelligent workspace and the Workspace app. This is kind of talking about what current present state. So if you're going to go onto a SaaS application, you open up with enhanced security off, and you open up your browser, you go right to the internet. Okay. Now, if you happen to have enhanced security on, this allows us to leverage a control point that is the Workspace app to afford controls on top of those SaaS applications. And what's really interesting about this is that this is not like a deep integration type SaaS security. It's an overlay on any of the SaaS applications you happen to have, because we're doing it through our browser environment that we control. And so we could do things, in this example, we're rendering a watermark, and this watermark, it would have to be done and rendered through our browser environment. And then, based upon those policies, we say, you know what, we've put enough conditions around for the end user to be able to access that SaaS property, and now we'll allow you to go to the internet and click on those things, and those controls are then inline and continuously monitored during the session in which to the SaaS application.
So the web filter is pretty important for regulatory reasons and avoid those bad actors. Those known bad sites, you want to just avoid having your users go there, right?
Yeah, and the end users don't always go there explicitly, right? Sometimes they go there by accident. Maybe there's some kind of phishing attempt where there's a link and they're trying to do it. And also, it's about your own policies and regulatory environment. The primary reason people put security controls in is because the regulations tell you they have to do it. And it's important too that this is fed with real-time threat intelligence to make sure that it's timely, because these sites come up and down, various URLs get munged different ways. So the ability to be able to have an active threat intelligence feed into this thing is also important.
Right. Okay.
So then, of course, the problem is that that's a very binary decision. Do I allow something or do I block something? But sometimes you want to allow a shade of gray. So this is a case where maybe you want to go on Facebook and you're saying, look, my users want to go on Facebook, but I still want to retain control, and I still want to make sure that if there's any threats that happen to materialize during that session, that they're contained in real time. And so this going to a redirect to a secure browser service is kind of giving you that ability to manage a shade of gray. I mean, if you look at it from an employee experience perspective, one of the things, Matt, is that when people go to work, they want to use the tools they're used to doing. And sometimes you as an IT department maybe haven't put all the policies in place to get the finer granularity of control. So this is a great interim step as well while you're trying to understand app utilization.
So we're really taking advantage of Citrix virtualization technology. And if they do get kind of a phishing email and get past one of those web filters, any threat to the endpoint is mitigated, right? We're going to leave that out in the cloud. Yeah, it's in an environment that's contained, and it's disposable too. So once that session goes away, all traces of it go away as well. So it's a great way of leveraging a technology we have a lot of experience in and orchestrating that within a security kind of paradigm. Okay.
So gateway service, right? So we have a gateway service. It's in the cloud. It is an end-to-end solution. Users get into it, we access it, we interrogate it, it's elastic, it has consumption pricing, and you don't have to worry about managing it. So if you're looking for a solution that, for a single sign-on, and you want to not manage that solution, the gateway service is a fantastic answer for that. We do all the upgrades, it's just a low-cost way of doing it. And you know what? It has all the cloud service benefits. During Black Friday, if you're a retailer, you have to have a burst consumption model, so you have to burst out. You can still, be able to do that kind of, massive, in time, real fast scheduling. And you know what? You don't have to worry about all the training of somebody to have to manage one of these devices. So from a, employee recruitment, retention, this is a much simpler consumption model.
And so Scott, we have obviously the Citrix ADC on-premise has been a workhorse for years, but obviously that adds some more complexity for the administrators, right? They have to get a public IP, do firewall rules, and they have to maintain multiple sites, which in the case of gateway servers, we're doing that with POPs around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we just added 2 more POPs, one in India and one in South Africa as well, and we're constantly reevaluating where we have to put these POPs, because the user experience matters, so you want to be close to where your applications are. What this thing is not, though, is a managed NetScaler. I mean, that's not the goal of this product. The goal is to provide gateway services to our customers. You
can still configure it for your environment, but we take care of the patches and the firewall bits.
Exactly. I always look at the Citrix ADC as kind of the Swiss Army knife, and the creativity that our customers do with it tends to outstrip the creativity sometimes that we think about. So, with the cloud, you're a little more prescriptive, so it's actually a good experience.
So you talked about, we figured out how to get them to the closest gateway, right?
Right.
To tee you up, and how do we manage that?
Yeah, so I don't know, intelligent traffic management right here is doing this for us. So we actually take advantage of all these millions of feeds that we have to be able to orchestrate the user experience, and we will redirect the load balancing based upon the ITM sensors. And so this gives us, this is kind of a representation of kind of the user experience and latency from different parts of Geo. And just like our customers can do this for global server load balancing, we actually take advantage of it for ourselves in our own service to make sure we get the best user experience.
Okay, and so with ITM, I think we have maybe 100 of predictive DNS points of presence around the world. They're going to get a quick response, and then they're going to respond with the POP that's closest to the user. It's going to figure it out based on kind of the complex algorithms that ITM maintains.
Yep, absolutely, and it continuously monitors that. So if there's something that changes in that disposition, we can dynamically steer that traffic to make sure that we still maintain a great user experience.
And so that's super important if we're going to SaaS apps, right? You need the users to get to the app without a lot of latency to have a great user experience.
That's right. If you look at things like Office 365 and other kind of applications, the user experience is really important. If you look at your own day-to-day, using the web, if something takes a lot of time, you hit the retry button all the time because you're trying to get hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. You don't want to be in the middle of that user experience. You want to make sure it's optimal.
Makes sense.
So let's talk about workspace, and we're here to protect our SaaS. I just love saying that. The reality is there's a lot of SaaS out there. And in fact, if you look at the workforce as they're coming into the workforce, they're very used to SaaS applications. And so when the employees come to your enterprises and your companies, they're going to expect a bunch of tools that they're kind of used to as they come in, and part of job satisfaction is being able to do that. So this is a chart just showing that, hey, 73% of all organizations say nearly all their apps will be SaaS by 2020. And I think the rate and pace of this depends on the industry. It depends on the vertical. We have large medical customers that have a much slower pace to doing this. They might pick certain apps. Some customer-facing apps. Highly regulated environments might be slower. But look at retail, SMB, different type of verticals. SaaS applications, take a credit card, you wipe it, off you go.
Makes sense. So a lot of benefits to SaaS for enterprises, but obviously just because you go SaaS doesn't mean IT's off the hook.
No.
IT still needs to be involved, right?
Yeah, I'm sure IT wishes that were the case, but that's not the case because they're still ultimately responsible for the perimeter. So how do you enforce a perimeter when there isn't any, right? Because you got all these different SaaS properties. Also, you have different geo-regulatory environments, GDPR, a bunch of different things happening. And at the end of the day, you're still responsible for app performance, at least getting to the app. You still have to worry about availability to getting to those apps. Data governance, if you look at the shared responsibility model that most cloud providers provide, data responsibility still rests with you on the enterprise. Mm-hmm. Single sign-on, the credential management for that can typically be your responsibility as well. And then you need some help to be able to kind of sew those things together. And so that's where the analytics and visibility tools are important, because if you can't see it, you can't protect it.
So enterprises can use those apps. They need to make sure they maintain their intellectual property and keep track of who's using what.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So let's take a look at the user experience with SaaS.
Sure. So you know what? The first thing you have to do is sign on, right? So here's a case where we're kicking on a Humanity app through the workspace, and it's booting up. And then you're on the app, and oh, look, it's a watermark in the middle of my app. And the reason it's doing that is the policies tell you to do that. Yep. One of the reasons we have that is photography is actually a threat vector. This came from a legal team, actually. This is one of the requests that they had for us.
Okay.
And they tried to click on the link, and the access was restricted because it wasn't an appropriate link. But we're going to the internal site. We click on that, and look, you know what? There is no watermark. It was okay. It was an internal site. Policy said it was fine. So you can do that on a per app basis. It doesn't have to be a global policy. Because if you add too much friction on everything, it's bad. And there was a case where I went through Facebook, and that was done in a secure browser session. So it's safe, it's contained, and the end user still gets to participate and use it.
And we have hundreds of SaaS templates, right? We're not going to go through them all, but here's another quick look at with Office 365. You click, you're in the portal, you're in your email, right? Very, very seamless. Now let's take a look at the architecture, and bear with me on this. It's not, we're going to do wash, rinse, repeat a few times. It's not Groundhog Day, okay? We're going to start with our device. We're going to have a workspace app. It's going to connect to the workspace service. Once those apps are enumerated and the primary authentication's done, it's going to contact the gateway service. It's going to get a preferred browser and a URL. At this point, this browser is going to use ITM to figure out which is the closest gateway. It's going to talk to the gateway, and gateway is going to communicate with a single sign-on service. It's going to get an assertion for that browser to present to the service provider. Service provider is going to validate that with the gateway service, and then the single sign-on is complete. Now, that was the case with enhanced security off. Likewise, with enhanced security off, if we're just using a browser, right, we don't have workspace app, similar process, we're going to log into the workspace, it communicates with gateway service, and it's going to gateway service is going to talk to single sign-on service, return the assertion that's validated by the service provider, and we have single sign-on.
Yep, all driven by policy, very granular.
Right, so that's all going to happen in split seconds. We kind of walk through it slowly there. Now let's change it up, and we'll notice that the devil is in the details here. We're doing enhanced security on. So now with the workspace app, we're going to talk to the workspace service. It's going to talk back to the gateway service. And in this case, it's going to recommend using the browser integrated in workspace app, right? We're using enhanced security. So gateway service is going to both talk to single sign-on service and access control and figure out which of those additional policies we want to apply to the browser. It's going to be presented still with the assertion. The native browser is going to talk to the service provider. It validates that. This is the SAML 2.0 dance, and they have a session. And likewise, it's going to be a bit different with the native browser. Here we're logged into the workspace with the browser. It's talking to gateway service. In this case, it's going to recommend it uses secure browse service. And secure browse service steps in. It's going to proxy, taking that assertion, contacting the service provider, and validating, getting that validated, and then completing the single sign-on. Now let's take a look at the admin experience.
Boom.
So we're going to start with Citrix Cloud in our gateway, single sign-on. We'll see this flow a lot. Here's our list of templates. I'm not sure how many we have.
It continually grows. I get it all the time.
So we're going to drop down into the Humanity app. First thing we'll find is we need to give some information about the app itself. In the URL, we're going to enter the actual domain that we created on the app site. Once we have that, we can move on. And here's where we can select or deselect enhanced security settings. And move on. And our last step here is to set up our single sign-on settings. So here, first we're going to go back, and for the assertion URL, we're going to enter our specific domain for the site. And now we're going to open this XML file, which has our SAML-specific information, that we need to share with this site. And so, Scott, when we go to this site, in this case, Humanity, we're going to go to a single sign-on section, but this is going to vary a bit by service provider, right? It's not all the same.
It's too bad we don't have micro apps for this to be able to find this easy.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. So we'll navigate to the admin section, and here we'll find details that we're going to pull out of that. We have an entity ID. We're going to copy and paste into the site. And also the logout URL. Then we'll take the certificate, the X.509 certificate, and paste that in.
Everyone knows our base 64 encoding. They can read that, right? It's good.
Very user-friendly. Okay, we save that off. We're done with the configuration on that side. And then we finish out the browser, the wizard here. And so now we can go ahead and provision our subscribers in the same manner we do all of our other apps. We'll drop into the app, manage subscribers, and select a Active Directory group or individual user. And there we've provisioned our single sign-on app. It'll be available in their workspace app at this point. Now we can go ahead and take a look back into access control, where we can do some customization. So here we can go in and we can either select specific categories that we want to blacklist. Right, these are lists of lots of known sites that may have maintained by bad actors.
That's correct.
We can go ahead and add those, and then likewise we can select secure browse categories. These are ones we want that are in that gray area. We want it to be hosted in the cloud. And then we can also add specific websites that we want to whitelist, for example, or what have you.
Yeah, typically internal websites that you're like, you know what, we're trusting that for now. And that's
okay. And here's a quick look at doing this with G Suite. So we'll skip ahead here a bit. We're going to start out the same way in Citrix Cloud. Go through the Gateway wizard. We can do a search for G Suite. We'll select it, and it's the same path. We'll be presented with app details. We can choose to do our enhanced security. And so what we'll notice in this case is we're going to enter, again, our domain-specific information in the URL fields. We'll notice in this case with the XML file, we can actually download that and import it to the site. So just another look at a different type of SaaS administration, if you will. We'll see we're here in the SAML admin page, and we're able to go ahead and just upload the file, no copy and paste, so a little bit cleaner setup there.
Yep.
All right, so now let's shift gears and talk about web apps, Scott. We saw in the SaaS graph there that a lot of companies are moving to SaaS, but there's still a need to maintain some of those apps that they have in their intranet, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that cloud journey sometimes can be a little bit exaggerated because you hear about cloud all the time, but a lot of our customers have a large on-prem premise, particularly around the more regulated industries, but they still want the same contextual access controls and flexibility and consistency of policy between SaaS and these apps. So yeah, absolutely.
So when we use apps on our LAN, right, we're kind of spoiled. There's security taking place, but it just kind of works for us, right? If you're in a machine that's domain joined, you might have Kerberos enabled and you don't know it, right? You're getting to your services without having to enter any details. This is a look at it in an IS site. If we enable NTLM, user connects to it, he's not in the domain, he's going to be presented with a need for credentials. And this gets back to what we kicked it off with. Not nice when you need to enter passwords, right?
Right.
And then once they do enter, they're able to get to that site. So let's take a look at the web SSO architecture. We're going to see a similar diagram here, similar beginning as to with SaaS apps. We're going to start with our workspace app. We connect to our workspace. It's going to communicate with the gateway service. And it also includes app control, right? So we can access control. We can apply those same kind of controls to the web app. But in this case, a difference here is we're not going to do SAML to a service provider, right? We're going to reach out to Gateway Connector. The way this happens is when the workspace app browser receives the token from us, it has a resource location identifier that allows the gateway service to communicate with that resource location and tell a gateway connector to communicate back with us. So Gateway Connector, right, it's a new virtual machine we added, Scott, and it's pretty much Citrix ADC code or Gateway code?
Yeah, we don't fork our code. We try to make sure it's the same consistent code, makes maintenance easier, and frankly, let's just be more agile in terms of feature development.
Okay. And so then we have our completed connection after that connection is set up from the gateway service to the gateway connector. And then that gateway connector is going to negotiate the authentication for us. It knows NTLM, Kerberos, or forms, if you will.
It's almost its own service provider. Almost takes the same role as the SP part of the whole SSO process, right?
Makes sense. Makes sense. And in the case, it's pretty much identical with if we're using our browser to log into our workspace. In this case, we'd be asked to use a secure browse service, and it will communicate with gateway service, which will check with access control and still set up that proxy to the premise, and the gateway connector will negotiate the authentication.
Cool. So that's a real true hybrid use case, right? I mean, we have an on-prem asset like the Citrix ADC acting as a gateway. We have the gateway service in the cloud, and they're both working together to provide you that kind of native web app experience and SaaS app all simultaneously. So your digital transformation on your enterprises isn't a choice between do I do a SaaS or do I do on-prem. It's all a consistent user experience across both those domains. So this is an opportunity for you to introduce SaaS properties and get more comfortable with those, or at least respond to what your IT customers are going to want to get deliver.
Users just selecting their app and they're working and being productive.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's take a look at the admin experience now for web SSO. So we're going to start again with with Gateway here. We'll select single sign-on. And so this list of templates we have is really for SaaS, right? We're pre-populating some links for you, but so we can select one. In this case, I select SharePoint, or we can just skip at this point, right? We're going to have to enter some information specific about our web app in our intranet. We have the ability to change the icon if we choose. And also, again, the same enhanced security, again, consistency in the admin experience, same access control settings. And then here's where we differ from the SaaS apps, right? We're not going to enter SAML information here. Here's where we're going to configure our gateway connector. So again, this is a virtual machine. We're going to download. You're going to pick your hypervisor. In this case, I'm using, we're going to use Citrix hypervisor. So we'll save that off. We'll skip ahead a bit here on the download. And so we're going to import our XVA. It's this simple, and we won't go through all these configuration steps, but we'll see once this launches, we'll look at the console screen, and you'll notice it's almost identical. It is identical to a NetScaler ADC VPX booting up, right? So after the boot process, we'll get back a DHCP address. We're going to connect on port 8443, just minor difference there. We're going to drop into a browser. We'll connect to that. So pretty straightforward to set up. And then there's just a handful of things we need to enter once we connect to the GUI. We're going to have a default administrator username and password. First thing we'll be asked, change that.
Change that password, please. That would be very good.
Yeah. And then we can set a static IP address, always a good idea. Configure it into your systems. Here we have the ability to, if we're going to use Kerberos, we need to enter some credentials, right? Our domain and our service account. We're using NTLM, so we can skip that. And then the last step is to get our activation code. Back in the cloud where we're setting this up, we're going to get kind of a long string here that we're just going to copy and paste. Long alphanumeric string there. And once we paste this in and save it off, we'll see we get a little bit of console too, where we can monitor some details of the virtual machine. We'll see that it turns green, and then we go back to the cloud. We detect it, and once we're connected. So now we have a kind of a reverse connection from the gateway connector back to the gateway service setup. And then we can complete, we're going to set up basic SSO here. This is the NTLM. And we complete our wizard, and then we're back to our standard process for provision new subscribers. So pretty straightforward, setting up access to your any intranet site seamlessly from your web app, your workspace app.
Yep, if you're familiar with doing it, without this is not much. This is not new news, I don't think.
And so we'll take another look at doing this with forms authentication. We'll skip some steps here. We're going to go through and here in the beginning of the setup, we'll skip. We'll make sure we select inside my corporate network. This is what we do for web apps. We're going to give name, URL to get to the site, change the icon, back to our enhanced security settings. And here we're selecting our gateway connector. So once we have one in place, right, every time we wash, rinse, repeat, add other web apps, we can use that same gateway connector. And of course, we're going to recommend 2 or more, right, for backup purposes. Here we're going to enter specific URL information about logging into the URI portion to logging into that web app. And once that's saved off, no, that was for forms right there, right? A little bit different. So we'll go ahead and we provision our users, same process. And again, it's a wash, rinse, repeat. Very, not hard. It's easy to, you avoid mistakes from the administration perspective. Similar. Now, if you look at the user experience, we're back in our workspace app. We see the app there. We'll go ahead and launch it. There we see the watermark show up, so we're still using those access controls of the web app. And then we see, for example, here we have an email, and if we get those phishing links, we can go ahead and block it if it's in the access control settings.
Here's a case where we have an on-prem application being protected the same way a SaaS application is, with all the same threat intelligence backing it up, and the same consistency of policies. And you don't have to set up these policies the same across every app. Every app you can have a different policy selection to be able to do it. And it also feeds into our analytics service, so you get a lot of rich telemetry out of that as well. So, it's a great, true hybrid cloud story.
Makes sense. Yeah, this is really what the workspace is about, right? Bringing together all of our technologies and capabilities. So now, Scott, let's shift gears, and we'll talk about our last of the 3 areas we're focused on. We talked about SaaS apps, web apps. Now we're going to talk about mobile apps.
Yeah, I never use my PC anymore. I've become a millennial, I guess. I don't know how that
Right.
happened.
And I don't know about you, but like entering a password on a mobile phone is way harder than a keyboard, right?
Yeah,
So,
I actually think that by putting passwords on mobile phones, it actually weakens passwords because no one wants to spend the time and energy putting complex passwords on that tiny little keyboard on your phone, right?
Fat finger,
so
backspace.
you fat finger it or something like that. So I think that's probably the weakest link in password utilization is actually the mobile device.
So we talked about we can get to SaaS apps. We talked about SSO for that. We talked about SSO using the workspace app. And so what we're getting at here is doing this with native mobile apps, right? Apps that Citrix doesn't own, but we're going to install those from public app stores, and we're going to provide the ability to do single sign-on through the workspace service. And so we're announcing this week tech preview for mobile SSO. So let's go ahead and take a look at the user experience. So here we're on our mobile device. We've launched the workspace app, and we're connecting to our site, entering our credentials. Here we see we have the Slack app. So the Slack app, if we don't have any other mobile apps installed, the first thing we're going to have to do is install Secure Hub, right? That we have to get the device enrolled. We skip ahead kind of through the enrollment process, but once the app is installed, we'll see that here we have a VPN connection. And so any mobile SSO is going to utilize Citrix SSO technology. And so here we'll see once that VPN is set up, the user is able to log into Slack and no need to enter their credentials. In fact, when we entered the domain there, we're just kind of demoing mobile SSO, but we can alleviate that with another endpoint management policy.
And there you are, using Slack.
Okay, so let's take a look at the architecture behind that. Again, similar kind of diagram, and they're going to be similar steps. We're going to start out with a workspace app, log into the workspace service, do that initial Active Directory, Azure Active Directory authentication. And then we're going to get the mobile app pushed on. This is something endpoint management can do. And then here's where Secure Hub comes into play. We're also going to need Secure Hub on that device. It's going to enroll in the endpoint management instance. And then at this point, we'll get into the admin details in a bit. We're going to push down a policy, and if it's not already on there, we're going to push down the Citrix SSO app. And so what we're going to do is that when the Slack app starts, we're going to intercept that call, and we're going to set up a VPN to the gateway service using the Citrix SSO app. And at this point, we're back to similar steps with the SaaS SSO. Gateway service is going to get an assertion, and it's actually going to proxy and communicate with the service provider on behalf of that app. It'll return the assertion to the Slack app or whatever public app we're providing SSO for. It'll communicate with the service provider, validate that. And then at this point, we have two options. One is that the traffic continues to flow through a gateway service. We can proxy that connection to the service provider. Other option is we can do split gateway, right? So we can avoid that and have the app go directly to the service provider if you choose to take that route. So Scott, you'd mentioned kind of using a lot of different elements of Citrix technology. This is a great example of that, right? We're talking endpoint management, gateway, workspace, a lot of technology orchestrating, working together here.
Yeah, what's really interesting is you've gone through all these different use cases and diagrams. They're all relatively simple. You're probably already bored seeing the same lines being drawn. But the advantages of having that is that that's a well-tested, well-architected infrastructure, and that consistency also translates to a kind of a consistent user experience as well. So we actually worked to make sure that it was actually the same as we could make it. And the exceptions like the endpoint enrollment and things like that, those are device-specific needs. But the actual authentication portion of it, the inline control portions of it, that's all similar, which means we can afford that commonality of policy and make actually the management of this a lot easier.
Good deal. Okay, and so to round us out today, let's talk about the admin experience for this. So We're going to start in Citrix Cloud, and first we're going to go into our endpoint management, and we have to do a few steps here. First thing we're going to do is add an entry for the public app that we want to push to the endpoint, right? So in this case, it was Slack. We'll go ahead and search for that for iPhone. Select that, move through the wizard, and apply it to the iPad as well. We're just going to show the iOS there, so we unselect our other platforms. We go ahead and apply that to a delivery group. And then we'll go ahead and we'll create a app inventory policy. So this is needed for the endpoint management to know what apps are on the device and which ones it's going to push the VPN policy to. And for new SIEM instances, this is already created for you. Now we're going to go ahead and create a VPN policy, and this is really one of the most important steps here. We're going to set it to Citrix SSO, and we're going to give a FQDN here. So as of the tech preview, it's going to be vpn.netscalergateway.net, but that could be subject to change. And this is where it's going to know which of those dozen or now 14 POPs to connect to. So we're going to enable per app VPN, right? We don't want this for the whole device. It's going to be for this specific app we're going to specify. And we're going to select on demand. We only want it to get set up when the app is in use, when we open the app. We're going to set it to packet tunnel. And then we're going to enter a Safari domain. It's going to be the same FQDN. This is so that if the app uses Safari network capabilities, it knows to intercept that as well. We'll save it off. And we also have the ability to enter this custom XML entry there. We're not going to do, but that's where we would enter a flag if we wanted to do split tunnel and avoid proxying that data traffic through. We'll go ahead and go through the wizard and again apply this to the user group. And so this is going to be pushed to any users that are part of that user group. And so last step here is we need to add a app attribute policy. And this is just required to map it. And this is for iOS, right? We're going to map the VPN policy back to that specific Slack app on the endpoint. And we select our VPN policy right there. And that's it on the endpoint management side. And so now we'll navigate back to Citrix Cloud, and we'll drop into Gateway. And then we're back to our single sign-on wizard, right? We're doing the same identical setup right now that we did for SSO apps. And the app on the mobile device is going to use that VPN to get transported to the gateway, and then it's going to utilize these settings to do that SAML SSO negotiation on behalf of the app. So we're adding our specific domain for Slack right there.
And these are the steps you would add just for the Slack app anyway. You're just doing it again to show, you add it to the mobile device, you're going to provision it on the cloud.
Exactly.
So if you've already provisioned it for other things, you should be able to take advantage of it.
Yes, that's exactly correct, Scott, yeah. So here we are on the Slack page, and we're entering our SAML details. This is our the SAML 2.0 endpoint details. And then again, we're filling out the assertion URL. We're putting in our specific Slack domain. And then here's our XML file, again, with our SAML details. So. And again, similar stuff. The devil is in the details. It's a little bit slightly different steps here, right, for each one. So again, the Slack site's a little bit different. We're pasting it in. Fortunately, we're not going to import that. Here we're going to put in the entity ID. That was the string at the very top of that XML file. Here we put in the FQDN, right? This is for our actual the gateway, Netscaler gateway, the Citrix Gateway POP. And then the last step is in our certificate, right? Our user-friendly certificate. I'm going to paste that in and round out the configuration on the service provider side.
Here we are. Yeah, I'm really proud of the begin and end certificate because I was on Twitter and someone was complaining that wasn't there and it kept not working. So I actually took that feedback and made sure to put it as a default.
Okay, thank you.
That makes it easier to provision that way. It was driving me nuts. So.
And then finally, to round us out today, we'll see we're back in the library. Easy peasy. We're going to manage subscribers, select our group, for the users on the endpoints that are going to have the Slack app provisioned, and they're ready to open the app and have single sign-on. So that does it for us. Now we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. So Scott, we talked about SaaS. It's really important, keeps growing in enterprises, and we make it simple to configure and easy for the end users.
Yep, absolutely. And SaaS is becoming more and more popular. But the reality is, it's a hybrid world. You're going to have applications on the cloud. You're going to have applications on-prem. In every cloud digital transformation conversation I have with customers, they're never in the same place. Every one of them is in a different place. And so we're trying to be prescriptive about what that journey should be, which this is why this is so flexible.
And then where SaaS doesn't work, if you still need those backend apps, right, we make it easy to get to them using the Gateway connector based on years of Citrix ADC technology.
Yeah, actually, and then we impose all the newness of the enforcement of all the access control policies on top of it. So you're not losing any control. We're actually adding more security controls on top of all your apps that way.
And then finally, using similar configuration process, we're bringing that single sign-on capabilities to mobile apps. So.
Yeah, that consistency of configuration for those mobile apps hopefully makes it easier for your administrators to kind of quickly provision these things.
And so I put down a couple of resources here. I'm sure you've heard about it from the other sessions. Check out techzone.citrix.com. There's a couple out there on access control and one on mobile SSO.
Yeah, make sure you get the sticker. The stickers are
actually,
awesome.
I have stickers. If flag me after, and plenty of stickers to put on the back of your PC or mobile device.
Yep.
Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, Citrix drew that, so that's awesome.
And so that wraps up this episode. The fourth episode, we're going to talk about content, right? So now obviously you get your apps out on your endpoints. You need content to do stuff, and we're going to talk about how we can manage that with our storage zones, and how with our connectors we can get access to that content wherever it's stored and provide it securely and provide a great end user experience with the workspace service.
Cool. Well, this has been a great session, Matt. It's been nice working with you.
Well, likewise, Scott. And then so before you leave, please be sure to fill out those surveys in your app. And the sessions are actually, I think, up on demand on the Citrix.com websites. And by June 3rd, you'll be able to download the presentations. And please do rate this app and give us any feedback you can for future sessions.
Yep.
It's look for session feedback in the mobile app and be sure to play Game On.
Yep, and take advantage of the early, the trials as well. And I know there's a lot of stuff going on stage here, but hands-on is definitely the best way to learn this stuff. So there'll be plenty of opportunities, hopefully, for you to do that.
Yeah, there was a session called 622 Monday and Sunday, a learning lab on how to configure SaaS SSO. It's also in a self-paced near the Citrix Learning Center. So you can go do a self-paced lab to get hands-on and do this while you're here at Synergy.
Yep.
And go ahead and please do tweet about the session, hashtag Citrix Synergy or Geek's Guide to the Workspace. Again, give us any feedback, particularly good feedback. And that's a wrap. I think we have maybe a minute or two for questions, if anybody has any questions.
Yep. Feel free to use the microphone because we have this being recorded, so if anyone wants to ask any questions. Awesome.
And if you don't, flag us in the front here after we're done. So thanks for your time today.